I'm Monte.
Hi, Monte.
Thank you very much for coming out on a Friday night. It's very gracious of you all to be here. I want to thank the museum whose idea this was in the first place. I have been writing about this for about 3 years, but no one until Amanda came along and challenged me to sort of summarize it and synthesize some of what we've learned at Tyee. And I want to thank the readers of and donors to the Tyee who've allowed me to do this work for the last 3 years. It's unique as a journalist to be able to just focus on something for a long time like this, and I'm really grateful. So we're going to talk tonight a little bit about ending homelessness. There are a lot of organizations that help the homeless for a little while and keep them alive and keep them fed. This is a rather incredible one. This was taken in the First United Church on Hastings Street, which has about 200 people a night. What we're going to look at tonight, though, is less the effort to keep them alive for another day, but more a question of how we can actually end this. So we're going to talk about 4 pieces of this. Our problem, how we got here, what works, and what we can do about this. The photos tonight, in most of this presentation, are taken by people in the downtown east side, many of whom are homeless or underhoused, of people in the downtown east side. This is a guy named Sundance, who is actually a friend of mine, and I think he represents well a lot of the problems we're going to look at tonight. He had a less than perfect childhood. He's Aboriginal. At one point in his life, he had a home. He had a family. He actually ran a small construction company. And he's been in the downtown east side for at least 5 years, dealing with most of the problems we're going to talk about. So, we have about 10,000 homeless people in British Columbia. To put that in context, that's about the size of Whistler. To put it in another context, it's about 2 homeless people for every 1 athlete we're bringing to the Olympic Games here. The median age of the homeless who've been surveyed in Metro Vancouver, and we haven't done surveys throughout the province, so in some cases this is partial data, is 41 years old. Most are men, but among the women, half of them are Aboriginal. First Nations account for 2% of the population here in Metro Vancouver, but fully 1/3 of the homeless. And we think that statistic is similar or even greater in other parts of the province. When we asked people in Metro Vancouver why they're homeless, why are you on the street, their answers were really quite clear. 25% said lack of income, 19% cost of housing, meaning they had some income but they couldn't afford what housing costs here, 17% through addiction issues, and 10% family conflict or abuse. So how is this our problem? Homelessness is expensive. If you're walking down the street or driving and you see someone in distress and you want to help, so you call 911. You spend $100 of local tax money. If the police arrive and they agree this person is not ready to go to jail but shouldn't be left on the street, they will probably call an ambulance. That's their best option. That's another $400. The ambulance drivers and technicians agree this person's not ready to go back to the street, certainly not appropriate to go to jail, they'll take them to hospital. There's another $800. And that's just for the first night. It gets more if there turns out to be serious problems. So that helping call costs taxpayers $1,300. Many long-term street homeless people have that kind of call placed about them on a regular basis, every couple weeks, every week. As a result of that kind of expense and others, estimates suggest that the average homeless person is costing taxpayers between $55,000 and $135,000 a year. We're spending about $1 billion a year.
Cheaper than the Olympics.
Well, funny you should mention that, Gar. We're spending about $1 billion a year on the Olympics as well. Vancouver sent a big headline recently, $6 billion in 6 years. It'd be interesting to see how surprised the Sun would be to discover we're also spending $6 billion in the same period of time on homelessness. and it's deadly. BC Coroner's Office says we're losing 32 or more people a year to homelessness, and many people have looked at this think their statistics are incomplete. But if you take the coroner's numbers as they are, we have someone dying of homelessness every 12 days in this province. I just want to introduce you to a few. This is Daryl McCasco. He burned to death while trying to warm himself with a Coleman stove. He's a father of 3, and he's 47 years old. This is Francis McAllister. He died of exposure in April of 2008. He was Cree. He was 37 years old. This is Michael Hubbard. He was shot in March of 2009. He suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. He's a father of 2 and 58 years old. This was the space where a woman named Tracy burned to death under her shopping cart in December of 2008. She was from Abbotsford, and she was 47 years old. And this is Curtis Brick. He died of heat exposure on Commercial Drive in July of 2009. He lay in distress for more than 6 hours as people continued to play in the water fountain, play music, have a normal day in a park. It was a very hot day last summer. Many of you remember that heat spell. He was 46 years old. And for me, Curtis is the one that gets me. Because I think it was the case in Vancouver just a few years ago that if someone was in distress in a park, we would have gone and checked. But all of us, myself included, have become so dulled, so accustomed to having homeless people in distress around us, that we are now capable, as a city, of continuing to play in the park and ignoring it. The reason this issue matters to me is that's not the kind of community I want to live in. 3 elements of what works: housing first, treatment at home, and community support. I'm going to talk about each of these for a few minutes. Housing first. What is housing first? Housing first means you get a room. You get one of those SRO rooms. You have your own sink. This photo is actually, again, of someone who had been homeless, who's able to start cooking. It's not a glamorous meal she's making in her restaurant sink, but it's a lot different having a sink than not having a sink. People who live indoors, only live indoors, have better health, they live longer, more seek treatment, there are far fewer police calls, and far less time in hospital. And as we remember, homelessness costs about $100,000 a year. Housing costs $37,000 a year. When I mentioned some of these numbers to my friend Sundance, who we saw at the beginning of this, he said something along the lines of, "This ain't rocket surgery." All right. So there's 3 elements of what works. First is housing. The next is recovery and treatment. So let's talk for a minute about what needs treating. And again, instead of deciding ourselves, let's ask the homeless themselves. In the survey a year ago, 61% of the people on the street said they were addicted and had problems with addiction. 46% said they had medical conditions. 33% said they were struggling with mental illness. 31% cited physical disabilities as part of their health problems. So when we talk about treatment at home, this is what we're talking about treatment. And the bottom line is, nobody gets better from any of those things while homeless. No one kicks their habits on the street. No one improves their physical health or their mental health while living on the street. There simply is not treatment without housing. I mean, and this is, it's obvious, right? But it's important to focus on for a minute. So, if you want to get treatment today, the way the system works, here's what you're probably going to face. And let's start, because they mentioned addiction was their main problem. Let's start with detox. You want to get into detox. What you're asked to do here is call a phone number and get on a list. And if you don't have a phone, and you may not have a quarter, but you need to call a phone number and get on a list. And if you don't get in that day, you need to call the next day and the next day. And you're expected to call every day and keep your name on the top of the list. And if you don't call, your name slips down the list. That barrier alone, believe it or not, prohibits a lot of mentally distressed, addicted people from getting into detox.